I'm very new to this craft of decoupage on shells, and I was pleased with how they came out. I first collected shells and then painted them with a base layer and then some pearly, and then I put on these little tissue paper, well, they were actually napkin designs, but I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have like a word? So I figured out how to do that, how to print on my computer, and I think it just adds a really nice little touch. Just think it's really cute. And maybe even more exciting is that I'm going to show you how you can print anything to decoupage, whether it's from the internet image or it's a photograph you have, or whether you're scanning something. And let's say you wanted to decoupage a frog. You could just download your own frog image and print it, and then use it without having to search for napkins that have a frog on it and buy it. Well, the first thing I did was just collect some shells, and I put them in some light bleach water to clean them. And then I took some gesso, I think it's pronounced, and some paint, and I mixed them together and put them in a little container so that it was thicker and richer than just the paint, but it wasn't quite as white. And then I painted that, I think, 2 coats in some cases. In some cases I didn't actually put any of it on. And then I covered it with a pearly coating finish. In this case, for example, there's no of the gesso base coat, just the pearly. And this one has 2 coats of the pearly. So then, when they were dry, then it was time to embellish the shells. For embellishing, I started with a napkin that has a bee design on it, and it's 3-ply, so you want to remove it down to the very, very top 1-ply. The bottom one comes off fairly easily. To separate the other 2, I just kind of lick my finger, dab it like this, and then it makes it easier to separate the plies. Well, I tried several things, and if you cut out the design and put it on the shell, it's pretty invisible. But if you rip it, it's a lot more invisible because the edges aren't as defined. But ripping napkins actually is not as easy as it sounds. So here's a little trick. It's something that I usually do with mulberry paper, and I just use a paintbrush with water. In this case, this paintbrush has a barrel where the water is in it, but you could also just keep dipping it. So anyway, all you do is trace around the area that you want to cut out, like that. And then it just tears really easily along the wet edges. And then you can just set it aside to dry. If you still feel like it's got extra that you don't really need, you either wet more, or in this case there is more wet that's just easy to pull off. Well, the next step is to apply some decoupage medium, and I'm going to use this golden self-leveling clear gel, but you could use Mod Podge or any other kind of sealer that you have or you can buy. I just applied a coating to the shell. And then I used a cute little tool called Embelly Jelly for picking up and placing objects where you want them, and I'm going to put it there. And then you want to press it down, and I've found it's easy to use some plastic wrap, or actually I discovered using one of these air pillows and just kind of pushing it into place. But whatever you use, you want to just, oh, see, I just squished it with the plastic wrap, so I'm going to just pull that off. Make sure it's got enough medium on the shell. And then brush more gel medium on, kind of going from the center out so you don't wrinkle it or whatever, disturb it. And now I'm going to show you how I create the text. Now, I was making these shells because I belong to a women's giving circle and our logo was a bee. So that's where this all started from. Anyway, I printed out words on inkjet paper. In fact, I also copied some images of a sea star from the internet and just resized them, because I think I'm going to use that on a different shell for a different reason. And then what I do is use the same technique I do when I'm using like vellum. Now, I've never done it with a big sheet of tissue paper, but that's what I'm using. And what you're going to do is cover the words with your tissue paper. I did iron the tissue paper, by the way. And then you'll want to tape it down. Now, I'm going to use some washi tape, so it probably would have been better to put your words a little lower down on the paper. Also, painter's tape would work fine, or even Scotch tape. And if you want, you can put one on the side. This is probably going to wrinkle over here. That probably was not great, because the tissue paper is kind of buckling up. Now, here is something that is not absolutely essential if you don't want to invest in it, but it makes a huge difference. And this is the use of the Perfect Crafting Pouch. It's a printing, stamping, ink drying, embossing, anti-static, clay releasing, sticker deactivating, multi-purpose crafting tool. And it was invented to make printing on vellum perfect, which this is an example of. But it helps a lot on all different kinds of paper, regular cardstock, mulberry paper, tissue paper, vellum, pearly paper, all sorts of things. Anyway, so all I do is put this onto the tissue paper, kind of rub it in a little bit, not really, just kind of wipe it on. A little harder on tissue paper because tissue paper is so delicate, but that's all there is to it. And the difference with using it and not is dramatic. Without using it, it was kind of a light gray, and in some cases the ink bleeds into the tissue paper, but when you use the pouch, it's just nice and dark and it doesn't bleed. So then all I do is put this back into my printer. For me, I have an inkjet HP, and so I have to turn the paper upside down so when it comes through, it prints in the same place, but on top of the paper. So I'm going to go do that. So there it is printed, and I will remove the tape. And really, doing a full sheet, some of them are going to print as well because there's just a little bit of a distortion. But if you print smaller pieces at a time on tissue paper, on vellum and pearly paper and such, cardstock, it doesn't matter at all. You can do a full sheet. But on this tissue paper, it's clear that it's a little bit finicky. So I'm just going to cut out this one, which I had made in several different sizes because I wasn't sure what was going to be the best for this shell, whatever shell I was going to use. And because it's in the middle of the paper, it's a little harder to just rip out, but there we go. Because this shell is sitting funny, I keep checking to see how I want the words to be, or the images. And then the last thing I want to do is add a little tiny red heart. Maybe it needs two. And then when it dries, the coating will become clear and shiny. So now I got this idea. Maybe I wouldn't actually need to get napkins at all. I could just copy images from the internet and print it myself. And I did center it in the paper, so it's easier to tape down. The other thing is I usually print my design in draft ink, so I'm not wasting ink when doing it on here. I just use this for the layout, and then when I do it for real, well then I use the full normal ink so that it's darker and richer. And I don't worry about it bleeding because of the pouch. Alright, now I'll go print it. And again, on my printer, I put it in upside down because it comes around like that. And some printers, you would put it in from the back and it prints like that. So you just have to know your printer which way to put the paper back in. So how cool is this to be able to copy any image from the internet, or scanning a greeting card or whatever, even a photograph, and be able to put that on your tissue paper and use for decoupage. How cool is that? I thought I'd do a test and show you the difference between using the pouch and not. So I'm going to cover the top, which will not have the pouch, and I'm going to use the pouch on the lower half, just to show you how much darker and crisper it is. It is pretty clear. Let me remove the tape. And of course, if I had used it on the tape itself, it would also be dry because the pouch has a drying agent. Right now, this ink is still all wet and will smear. You can see how the happy is kind of smeary. The bottom part was the part that was treated with the pouch. So even just looking at the word kind got smeared, but nothing below the difference in the word inspired. You can see how much crisper it is on the lower one. Even halfway through the word happy, the bottom part is crisp. And that's why when printing, I use the Perfect crafting pouch.